What's up guys, my name is Dean, aka the Blue Crusader, and welcome back to the channel. In today's Minecraft mod showcase, I'll be taking a look at Electroblobs Wizardry. This is perhaps one of the best, if not the best, Minecraft magic mod. I'm going to show you how to use the mod, how to get started, and how to become a wizard and make your own magical spells, and set up all the blocks and items in the game required to get the mod rolling. Let's take a look at the mod. So how do we start off in the Electroblobs Wizardry mod? Let me explain. So first of all, the first steps of the mod is you're going to want to gather these things called crystal shards. Okay, so we have some magic crystal shards right here, and these are what we're going to need in the mod to start our magic journey. So we have these normal crystal shards, and then we also have these grand magic crystals. Okay, and basically the way that we get these crystal pieces, the magic crystals, is from this crystal ore which you can find in the world. So this is what the crystal ore looks like, and as you can see, let's just get ourselves a normal diamond pickaxe, go into survival mode, and I've picked diamond just because it's the quickest to mine. And when we mine these, you can see we get these magic crystals from them. Okay, so even though I showed you the magic crystal shards and the grand magic crystals, these are two separate items which are different variations of them. When we actually mine the crystal ore, it actually just gives us the normal crystal pieces, and these are what we're looking for, just the magic crystals. These are the required items which we need to actually start off the mod with. Now what's important is we do need a few of these, so you are going to have to find this crystal ore, and to start off the mod we're going to need at least 15 of these. So I'm just going to mine 15 blocks of ore, or less, because it does actually give you multiple per vein sometimes, and we have 18 magic crystals. Now another recommendation for the mod to start off with is start off with some smooth stone, so try and find yourself some general materials. In this case we're going to gather some normal stone which we can get via getting cobblestone and then smelting it into normal stone in a furnace. So get some of this stone, get quite a bit of lapis lazuli if you can, like a handful of pieces. It does recommend doing this. I've just spawned 64 just to show you. You also need some wool and some gold pieces, preferably these type of gold pieces, which you use to craft into ingots. So try and find the gold pieces rather than the ingots, and also a couple of books, because of course we'll be making magic books for the Electroblobs Wizardry progression. So now that we've got all these starting materials, we can begin. So the next step is to get yourself a copy of the Wizard's Handbook. So we're just going to go ahead and search the Wizard's Handbook, and we can see over here the Wizard's Handbook. And the way we would craft these is by using one of these books which we've collected, and we'd craft them along with one of these magical crystals, which luckily for us we've actually found, or you should have found at this point when you actually gathered the ore which I showed you to get, which is the crystal ore. And this lets us create our very own Wizard's Handbook item. So this is very important. This is part of the core of the mod, and if we right click, it says the Wizard's Handbook by Electroblob, and we get a little bit of an introduction here. So this explains some of the steps which would be super useful if you weren't watching this video, or a walkthrough or a guide for an example, and it would give you some beginning tips. So this will cover things like mana, setting up the mod generally, and crafting recipes, as well as credits. So, for an example, another thing to get started, you'll need a magic wand. Now, this is why I told you to get the gold pieces, and sticks are really easy to get. We can just get those from wood, along with more magical crystals. This is how we're actually going to make the wand, which we'll do in a few moments. Now, another step is the Arcane workbench. It shows you how to create this too, and then it also shows you the magic missile spellbook. So basically all of the steps are in this handbook. So technically, if you are clever enough to play a Minecraft mod, which most of you guys are, then you'll be able to just follow that if there's a few parts you don't understand in this video from my tutorial. So, okay, so this is the magic handbook. We know how to craft stuff now. We have all the materials to do so. So let's start on that next. So we need a magic wand, we need an arcane workbench, and we need the magic missile spellbook, which is the first rookie spellbook which we're going to use. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and make the arcane workbench. This is a really important item which we're going to use, which gives us a crafting interface, or kind of like a spell interface in the block. So we need some normal crystals. We have magic crystals, so we can use those. We also need a purple carpet, okay? So this means that you're going to need some dye for your wool. So for me personally, I can just spawn wool. So I'm just going to add this as a favorite to my item list, just so I can go back to that. I'm going to spawn myself some wool. Also, you can spawn yourself some purple dye as well. So I could spawn myself some purple dye, and then I could obviously put that next to wool and give myself purple wool. So I now have purple wool. And then obviously we could use that to craft some purple carpet. So that would just be 2 wool next to each other. So now I have the purple carpet piece. We also need the gold pieces, which we already have, and the smooth stone, which we should have already collected. So at this stage, you should already have a crafting bench, because that's just typical Minecraft. So we're going to spawn one of those, and I'm going to show you the recipe. So this is what the recipe looks like. okay? Now, it will show you a variation of the recipe. Now, another thing is I told you to gather some lapis lazuli pieces. The purpose for this is you're actually going to need 9 of them to create a lapis lazuli block. So I'm going to go ahead and craft one of those. And then we should have enough items in the recipe to create ourselves an arcane workbench. And this is what the crafting recipe looks like. So gold here, purple carpet, lapis in the middle, 2 of these magic crystals which we gathered from the crystal ore with smooth stone on the bottom, and we have our arcane workbench. So the core of the mod, the main part of this mod, we now have, and you can see we have a few different advancements there on the right hand side to show us that we're actually making headway and progress in the mod. So the arcane workbench, as you can see, when we place it down here, it really doesn't matter where we place it down in the world. We can basically put it anywhere. I've just chose to put it here. Now, I'd recommend using a stone pickaxe or better to break this, because I believe if you punch it, it permanently breaks the block, okay? So as long as you have a stone pickaxe or greater, for an example, I have diamond, then we can place it back down. And what's interesting is it does actually illuminate, because it's actually getting kind of dark. And then when we place it back down, it kind of gives off light, which is kind of cool. So when you right click on it, you see a GUI, which is the interface, okay? And it looks something a little bit like what you're seeing right now. Now, this central slot is where we're going to place wands, wizard armor, and scrolls in the mod. So we should have a magic wand by this point, which we haven't created yet, so that's going to be the next step. So I'm going to search wand, and you can see this is the basic magic wand. So along with sticks, we can just gather sticks really quickly just from this tree. We're just going to gather some sticks so we have enough sticks to actually create the magic wand. And you'll probably end up starting the wizardry mod quite far into normal survival progression, so you should already have basic stuff like sticks. So now we have some sticks, so we can go over here, and the crafting recipe is 1 magic crystal in the top right, in the middle a stick, and a gold piece in the bottom left. So really simple recipe. Now we have our magic wand, so we can just go ahead and shift click this in here, and it'll throw it in the middle slot like we said before in the arcane workbench. And now we'll see mana, the level of the mana in the magic wand, and the level of our wizardry progression. So we're a novice, and the next level I believe is apprentice. Now when you place the magic wand in, you see 5 new slots which weren't there before, so these appear when we place the magic wand in the workbench. Now these slots are for spell books, and each one of these will correspond to the different spell slots on your wand. So for an example, it says current spell, empty slot. So these 5 different slots are spells which we're going to assign to our wand. Now, the only spell book which we'll have at first is the one which we're going to craft, now, which is the magic missile spell book. If you're lucky enough to have found some when you were already exploring, then you'll already have more to utilize. But right now, the only one you should have is the magic missile spell book if you've already crafted it before we have, or we're going to craft that and go ahead and do that now. So we're going to go on the Wizardry Handbook, and we can see the spellbook magic missile is just a book surrounded by magic crystals. It's a really basic recipe. So we'll just throw a book in there, which we should have already gathered, and surround this by magic crystals. And now we have the magic missile book. So we could go into our interface, shift click this, and now you can see that we now have the magic missile spellbook here. So if we would click tick on this, we would assign this to an empty slot. So it says now magic missile is in one of the slots, and then the other 4 slots are actually still empty. So technically it says now the magic wand is the current spell magic missile. So technically if we take this out of the table now, here's our magic wand, and now it says magic missile in the bottom left hand side of the screen. So we've actually assigned a spell to it, and it now says it on the item tooltip. So that's the basics of assigning a spell in the Arcane Workbench interface. Now, one thing that you may have noticed earlier when I mentioned the mana level is there's actually no mana, so this is 0 out of 700. This is going to become a problem, okay? Now, the reason why this is a problem is because without mana, we can't use any magic, so we can't technically use the spell, which we've actually just assigned to the wand, which is going to be a problem. Mana is basically magical energy, which we're going to use to cast spells, just like in games like Skyrim and other RPGs, or World of Warcraft, for an example, if you play a magic class. It's the same kind of idea where wizards use mana as the energy to cast the spells. And without mana, the wand is basically useless. Okay, so if you want to recharge some mana, we're going to use those same little magic crystals we had before, and we're going to put them in the bottom left slot, okay? Then we press this little tick here, and you can see it didn't use all of them, but it used a fair amount of them that we put in the Arcane Workbench, and it's given us 3 left, okay? But what it has done is it's fully charged the mana in our wand, so we can now take this out, and it'll give us the spellbook back too. And now if we right click, it's going to shoot the magic missiles. So now we have these magic magic arrows, which we can fire outside of our wand. So now we can actually use our magic because we actually have full mana. Now this is actually important because now that we've fully recharged it, we can actually use it. So if I test this on a wolf, you can see it doesn't do too much damage. It's kind of like a basic spell, so it's not really a high power one. But you can see we can also fully charge it by holding right click. And we can tap right click. So if we hold it after a spell, the wand will kind of just stay there in limbo. And then if we right click again, it'll shoot. And you can see there is actually a cast time. In the bottom left, there's kind of like a yellow and purple bar. You can see where the spell casts and there's a little bit of a pause before you can cast it again. So that's interesting. So we've used our first spell, we've recharged it with mana, and that's basically how it works. And mana has been stored in our wand. Now to see our mana level again, let's just throw this back in here. You can see our mana level is now 555. So we did actually use around 145 mana just from flinging a few of those magic missile spells. So you need to balance out using this and figure out how much you want to use it without trying to drain the mana, because if you don't have many crystals, you're going to need to conserve mana. Now, I have tons of these different crystals, these grand ones for an example. Just one of those crystals recharged that full 145 mana with just one crystal. So if you have a grand magic crystal or a greater one than just the normal magic crystals, then obviously it's going to give you mana for less items being expended. So we've now recharged it. So that's the basics of assigning a spell, the basics of the mana system, and recharging mana for your wand in game. So if we wanted to get more magic spells, which we can see over here, the empty slots, we'll fill those up later using these different input slots inside the workbench later when we actually find additional magic books. This is pretty cool. It means that you can assign multiple spells in the mod to the same wand, which is really awesome. Now, if you would have multiple spells in your wand, you would actually use a special set of keys to actually cycle through them. So as you can see, I would use the N key, and as you can see, when I press the N key, it actually cycles through the different spell slots in the bottom left corner. And currently we only have one spell, which is Magic Missile, unfortunately. But if we did have more, these empty slots would be filled by a different spell, and we could use the N key and the B key to switch between them and alternate which spells we want to use in the current moment. Now, the B key on my game is assigned to a different mod, so I'm just using the N key, but if you just have the Wizardry mod, it should be both the N and B keys to cycle through your spells. And also, if you hold shift and use the scroll wheel on your mouse, that also does exactly the same thing, so we can cycle through the spells by doing that action as well. The next thing you want to do is basically go exploring. So if you go explore a dungeon and go through dungeon chests, you can find things like different wands or magical spell books, which is what you're going to want to find. So exploration in this mod is paramount if you want to make progress. There's a lot of different magic books to collect and a few different structures which you can find them in whilst exploring in the mod. Now, another cool thing to do is at this point when you have basic magical spells and kind of basic understanding of the system, now that I've showed you how to do it, another cool idea would be to actually go ahead and craft some wizard armor. So if we would search wizard, we can see the basic wizard armor is over here. So this would be made from something called magical silk. Now, this is pretty simple. As you can see, we can make this magical silk actually really easily. Okay, all we need is these magical crystals we had before and string. So I can just spawn another stack of these magical crystals in my inventory over here. And then I can also spawn some string and just show you the basics of crafting this because it's actually really straightforward. So we need something called magical silk. So I'm just going to craft as much of that as I can. And you can see now I can just craft the wizard armor. It basically has exactly the same crafting recipes as any other armor in the game. We just fill it in with magical silk instead of a normal ore which you would use if you were making something like iron armor or diamond armor. So now we have the basic wizard armor. String's really easy to find in the world, so that's pretty easy to locate. So you just kill spiders for an example. And also if you want to find crystals, you would just mine the crystal ore, which I showed you how to find before. So that may actually take a while to actually locate in the world. So you might need to do a lot of mining, but apart from that, it's actually pretty straightforward because the crafting recipe is really simple. Now, one thing to know is that this is the basic wizard armor, okay? But this is not the only wizard armor, because if we go into wizard's gear, we can see we have something called ice mage's gear. We also have pyromancer boots. We have storm mage armor, necromancer armor, earth mage, sorcerers, healers, sages, ice sage, storm sage, necromancer sage, earth sage, all of these different types of armor. So I'd recommend using just enough items like I'm doing, and then you can just press R on the item and it shows you the crafting recipe. So you need these items called small mana flasks, which you make out of magical crystal shards and a glass bottle, and you get crystal shards by basically just placing the normal crystals in your inventory. So I would just place the normal magic crystals here and I'd get crystal shards, and then I could use those to create, with a glass bottle, a small mana flask over here. I could create these now that I have the glass bottles and the mana shards, and then what you could go ahead and do is use the normal sage hat with one of these flasks to create the upgraded one. This basically just gives you additional bonuses because it's basically just a mana item. So there's a lot you can do with the armor, guys. Some of it's a bit more complex and some of it requires more progression, but that's the basics of the armor system and crafting your first wizard suit. This isn't all of the armors in the game, but this is a good idea of some of the most basic sets of armor in the game and all the different color variations of a lot of the main core wizard suits and wizard robe sets, which you can actually access once you actually craft them and want to upgrade your suits. There's also a set of different blocks in the game called Runestones. These basically function just like stone and they have very similar properties to normal stone blocks in Minecraft. Now there's not really many uses of these particular blocks. They're mainly used as ornaments and for decoration, but it's what most of the structures such as the obelisks and the shrines which you'll find in the mod are actually constructed out of. Now you'll see there's a few of them which are slightly different and they have different patterns on them, and a lot of them have different symbols on them. As you can see, this yellow one has two stripes on front of it, whilst this green one has a circle, and this has kind of like a coal block item texture. So they've got a few different faces to them. These are rune stones, they have different runes on them, and they have different color sets. Now if we go into the rune items, you can see they're based on different elements. Now they're just all called rune stones, but they obviously have a different style to them. Now also below we have the runestone pedestals, which are created from this material too. But as you can see, these are created with crystals and normal stone, whereas the runes themselves are created with crystals and stone too. So you can actually craft these out of crystals and stone. This is why they use the same properties as stone, because that's one of the requirements you need to actually make them. Now if you wanted to make one of these runestone pedestals, which I'm going to spawn over here, you can see a pedestal is an item which actually holds something. So basically these pedestals are also display blocks as well, but they hold the tile entity which is responsible for shrine mechanics. Now we can't actually place anything on this in creative mode unless we use a special command to actually set the pattern of it, but it is possible to use a command to spawn it with its naturally summoned item on top of it. But you'll have to find a structure if you want to find these naturally, how they're actually supposed to be. Now you'll see over here we actually have tons of different items, okay? So we have rings here, and a few different things like amulets, and also a few different items like seals. So let's just go over a few of these and then we'll look at a few of them and look at the stats. So these are called artifacts in the Wizardry mod. These are basically items which you find in shrines when you're exploring around the world, and these give different bonus effects to the player. So for an example, these bonuses and effects and abilities which are granted to the player basically improves your magic in the mod. Now there's three different types of these artifacts. We have the rings here, which improve attack abilities. Amulets, which basically are more about defense, so you can see these reduce fire damage by 30% as an example, or incoming damage by 75%. So amulets are more about defense, whereas rings are bonuses to attack. And also charms down here, like these talismans for an example, which generally improve utility spells in the mod. So over here you can see that these have different utility offerings, so we can summon zombies and skeletons that have leather armor to protect them from sunlight, so it makes your summoned necromancy minions a lot more powerful. And also we improve flight and glide by using this wing. So there's some really nice items that give a huge bonus to your magic abilities and general utility options in the game. Now these items were made originally to be used with the baubles mod, which is that mod which gives you a little extra inventory for things like rings and extra possessions on your character, but you don't need that to actually use these in the mod. Now all of these are exclusively found from shrines in the game, and each shrine is guaranteed to contain at least one of these amulets or rings or utility items in them. Now you can see they have a different colour which corresponds to their tier, so we have blue, purple and yellow, and these indicate how rare they are, and the higher tiered items are obviously a lot more rarer to actually find as loot. Now to use these you would actually have to put them inside a slot on your action bar. So if you wanted to use a ring, you can't actually wear one of these, you have to actually have them in your action bar. Now, like I said before, if you install the baubles mod, which I don't have installed right now, it gives you a special inventory on your character screen where you can equip things like rings and actually have them inside that character window instead of just lying in your inventory. So I'd recommend installing the Baubles mod if you want to get the most out of artifacts in the Electroblobs Wizardry mod. We also have an item called the Tome of Arcana. Now you can see there's 3 different levels to this. We have the Apprentice one, the Advanced one, and also the Master level. Basically, these upgrade any wand with sufficient progression to the next tier. So this one, for example, upgrades the Novice wand to an Apprentice tier, then the Apprentice wand to the Advanced tier, and the Advanced to the Master tier. These are found in loot chests in dungeons when you're exploring, and wizard towers, or you can actually buy them from wizard mobs in game 2. Now the Apprentice tomes are actually pretty common to find in the game, and the Advanced tomes are a little bit uncommon, they're a little bit rarer, but the Master ones are very rare, so they're a lot harder to find. So basically, let me just go ahead and spawn a few of these. So we would use these in the Arcane workbench which we created before. So now we have our wand, so we can put the wand in, and then we can also put this Tome of Arcane at the top, and press tick, and we've upgraded it to the Apprentice wand. And then if we put the Advanced wand in, it upgrades it to the Advanced wand, and the Master Tome, it upgrades it to the Master wand. So we've basically increased our wand tier to the next level, I guess. And then we can just put crystals in here and give it full mana, and now we have a really awesome wand. So we've upgraded our wand to the max tier, and that's how you do it. And you need the correct tome to upgrade. We can't just use the Master Tome on a Novice wand. It doesn't work that way. You have to upgrade it from worst to best in the same series, just like I did. So you're going to need all 3 tomes to upgrade it directly to Master. Now in the Creative tab, you can see there's so many different scrolls and spell tomes. The books are what we use to actually assign to our wand. So I'm just going to spawn 4 different spells, so I can assign these different spells onto my wand, just so we have a few more abilities to show you. I'm not going to show you all the abilities in the mod, I'm just going to show you these ones. So let's just put the wand in here, and we'll assign all these different abilities here, and then we'll put our first magic missile ability on, and now we have a wand which has multiple abilities. So in the bottom left, we now have the ignite ability. So let's go ahead and let's just spawn some basic mobs in Minecraft. We'll just spawn cows because they're passive and they're not going to fight back. Okay, so now we have our involuntary helpers. Let's summon the ignite spell. So you can see we can set things on fire. Now these cows are smart enough to go to the closest nearby water source. So if we set these guys on fire, they're just going to run in the river anyway, and it's going to be a useless spell. Even if we hit them from far away, they're actually smart enough to run to the river and try and seek water basically to extinguish themselves. So that's the ignite spell, which has quite a far range. You can see I can't hit these guys over here, but we can hit these guys pretty close too. So it has, I don't know, maybe a 10 block or less range on it. And then if we press the N key, we can switch to Thunderbolt. So basically, this shoots kind of like a small blue thunderbolt at them and hurts them. It does immediate damage, so they can't go to the water to protect themselves from this. This doesn't shoot lightning from the sky, which is kind of a shame, but it has its own kind of spell effect to it. Then we have summon zombies. This is one of those necromancy spells, and as you can see here, we can summon a zombie. Now, like I said earlier, if we have one of these special items which I showed you, there is actually one where we summon zombies which have leather caps on them, and this basically means that the zombies won't die to the sun, because you can see my zombie I just summoned just died. So if we right click now with this item equipped, this cursed helm, which is one of the uncommon artifacts I talked about earlier. Now we summoned a leather cap zombie, and this guy won't die in the sun. So we can use this minion to basically fight people, and the sunlight won't hurt him. So that's why you should focus on getting some of those artifacts. Then the last spell is the mine spell. So this is actually really cool, okay? So this is just going to mine blocks for us. So I'm not sure what level of blocks you can actually mine with this, but you can see we can mine basically anything. I mean, we've just mined coal as well. So we can mine a lot of blocks. Now, I'd be interested to spawn some diamond ore just to test if this works with diamond. Okay, it doesn't work on diamond, okay, so that's interesting. But remember, there's actually a different tier of spells. So you can see below it, it says novice and then apprentice. So certain spells require a certain level of magical efficiency to actually use. So that's why upgrading our wand was really important. Now, I believe this mod has around 170 something spells. I think the exact number of spells in the mod is 172 currently. So there's a lot of different spells which you can use over here and find and unlock in the mod. So playing around with them is basically the best way to do that. Now, if you go on the guide on the website, it'll show you the spells, what they do, the element of the spell, the type of spell. Is it a projectile, an attack spell, or a minion summoning spell, for example? How much mana it uses, and whether it's a continuous spell, and if wizards can use it or not. There's a lot of data on the website which I recommend referring to if you want to learn more about spells in the Electroblobs Wizardry mod. So the next part of this video is what a lot of you guys will look forward to in a lot of these mod showcase videos. So let's take a look at some of the mobs in the Wizardry mod. This is a feature which isn't really covered in a lot of mod showcases. It's mainly about the magic, so let's take a look at the creatures which we can spawn. So we'll start off with the humanoid creatures. So the first one is the normal wizard. You can see this is what the normal standard wizard looks like, and if we right click on this guy we can do some trades. So if we would give this guy a spell book, which could be any spell book for an example, he can give us some magic crystals which we can trade with him. So we can just take magic crystals out of here. If you give him gold and crystals, he'll give you spellbooks. So he sells some custom spellbooks, and he also sells these wand attunement upgrades, which upgrades the number of spells that can be bound to a wand. So this is another thing I didn't cover, these attunement upgrades which improve your wands. So these are basically good guys, and they also perform as vendors. Now one thing to note is that guy spawned as an ice mage, this guy spawned as a healer, so it will spawn a random type of wizard when we actually spawn them, and they have a different proficiency. So this guy's a necromancer. Then there's also, as well as good wizards, there's also evil wizards. Now we can't actually use these guys as vendors because they're not very nice people. They basically look the same as good wizards, but they just have red eyes and they make evil sounds just like pillagers. And this good wizard is going to fight this evil wizard, and they're basically going to have a magic war just like something off Harry Potter. So if you're interested in basically magical fights like with wands, like off Harry Potter, this is how you do it. You just spawn an evil wizard and a good wizard. And not only this, they won't just attack each other with basic attacks, they'll actually use spells too. So this guy is basically earthbending like Avatar. He's throwing around this spinning boulder. This guy's summoning these shadow wraiths, and then the other dude's summoning zombies. So they will have all-out wars, real impact fights with different spells. So it's really interesting to watch. Then we have the Ice Giant. So this is just like something off Thor. These guys are pretty cool. They have a really nice custom model. They're basically just like Iron Golems. They look very similar. Then Ice Wraiths are what those guys just summoned when they had that battle over there. And there's a few different types of Wraiths. There's the basic Ice Wraith, there's the Lightning Wraith, and also the Shadow Wraiths. So as you can see, this guy's just basically a smoke cloud that's purple. So these guys look very similar, but they perform differently. They have a different skin and they have different types of spells and attacks. There's also the Phoenix. So this is that huge bird which I'm sure you've seen on a lot of the Wizardry mod videos and thumbnails on YouTube. This is those really awesome, beautiful, fiery birds which fly around. These are basically those birds in fantasy that are reborn once they die. Yeah, these are phoenixes. They're pretty cool. So let's take a look at the last three mobs on the list. So the first is the Spirit Horse. So these are basically ghost versions of horses. And as you can see, we can still mount these guys just like a normal horse and put a saddle on them and armor on them. So they perform like a normal horse. And also Spirit Wolf. So you can see this is basically just like a normal wolf, but he's kind of like a ghost. These remind me of those wolves which are on World of Warcraft. When I used to play that as a kid, I remember there was these ghost wolves on the game that you could tame as a hunter. So this kind of reminds me of that. These guys look pretty cool. And also, the final mob, which I haven't covered, is also the Storm Elemental. So these guys will just swing around and create lightning, just like that Thunderbolt spell which we used earlier. It basically performs like the exact same thing, and these guys swing around in a tornado style animation. There's also a few different structures in the game, the first being the Obelisk, which are structures that generate on the surface around the overworld. I'll try and put a picture on screen of the structures. I'm just going to loosely go through them, so I'll try and put a basic picture of each structure on the screen while I'm talking about them. And basically, these are tall and narrow structures with an open structure at the bottom which contains a monster spawner and a chest which usually has magical loot inside them. Then there's the shrines, which are also surface overworld structures, and they basically have a ring of different runestone pillars of those runestone blocks I talked about earlier, which have different heights to them, and they're surrounded by a runestone pedestal. There's a magic style lock chest on top which contains magical loot on top of one of those runestone pedestals which we mentioned earlier too. So this is another really cool loot spot. And the final structure is the Wizard Towers. These generate in the overworld and they're usually rounded in shape with a pointed roof with some windows to them, and they're found in different shapes and sizes. These basically have an arcane workbench in them, just like what we created at the start of this video. There's some bookshelves too, so you can get books there, and there's torches and usually a wizard NPC or mob inside too. Sometimes these actually have evil wizards in them, and this means that you're going to be in for a fight. So there's not always good wizards that live in these towers, but you'll be assured that if it's an evil wizard, there'll be a chest with some loot there, basically to reward you for having to do the fight. Now these are really nice because if you happen to stumble upon one of these magical towers really early in the game, it means that you don't have to craft an arcane workbench. You get tons of books which you can use to actually create magical spells or use for the recipes which I've showed you before, and it just gives you a huge kickstart in the mod. So if you happen to find one of these early, you can skip a lot of these stages which I've explained already in this mod showcase. So this was the Electroblobs Wizardry Minecraft mod showcase. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a comment down below and give the video a like, and make sure to subscribe with notifications on for more Minecraft videos. Drop a comment below if there's any features that I missed or any other tips you want to give people on playing the mod, and consider becoming a member if you want my Minecraft mods and access to the modded Minecraft server to play with us all, because we play on there every single week. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.